this diplomatic stalemate, if you have sufficient contacts at the level that Kurongpa was dealing with, he could have said to them, look, release Mr. Taylor, because it is apparent that they would not have sent me anyway. I'm in jail about 2 to 3 days. I don't know the date of the actual attack on Monrovia. I do not know. But I'm released from jail about 2 to 3 days before the attack. As I arrive in New York City, the attack is already gone. About 3 to 4 weeks before, one of the prison guards in a supervisory position came and told me that I would be leaving the prison. And he wanted to find out that if I was let out of the prison, if I could actually get out of the United States as quickly as possible, because upon leaving, I would have to leave the United States. I said to him, I said, well, it would be a little problem, but I will get to my wife and ask her to, to raise a certain amounts of money that would be made available to me if and when I got out. Now, that was a little sticky because my wife and I are not living together. I have now moved to Boston where I'm arrested. I'm with this girlfriend, Agnes, who later becomes my wife. But my wife, Tupi, and I had bought a piece of land in New Hampshire. So I had to authorize her to sell the land to raise some money that when I got out of jail, I would be able to do something. The Plymouth County House of Correction is both a minimum and a maximum security facility. The minimum security facility of that jail, you have people who are about to get out, they go work in the fields, come in, go out. It's virtually for people that, who have no good reason to get out of jail, because in that facility you are there. Within the building, you have to walk from maximum security through so many gates to get into minimum. And the minimum side of the jail is really minimum. Low walls, as people walk out and do what they have to do. On the date that I reported back to them, to the guard, and told him that I had arranged with my wife, and after she assured me that she had sold the land and had some money, we had to really give the land at rock bottom price. I told him that we had some money. He verified my passport. He verified that I could get out. I can remember one evening at about 10, he came, opened my cell, it was during lockdown time, and escorted me from the maximum security side through server gates to the minimum security side, where there were 2 other detainees there standing. They were already out. They had already, I don't know who cut it, but I think the guards had made these arrangements. Those 2 guys and myself with the guard, this one guard, and I do not know and will not lie if he was operating with anybody else, but I believe that he had to be operating with somebody else. I was taken out. We got to the window. These guys took a sheet. We tied it on the bar in a very short distance, and we came down, got over the fence. There was a waiting car outside. There were 2 guys in the car. These other 2 guys and myself got in the car and drove, and their instructions, the guys who were driving the car's instructions were to get me as far as New York, where I had told them I wanted to go. They drove me from Boston. We stopped in Providence, Rhode Island. My wife came, brought the money. She was in a second car, and the 2 cars drove. The 2 guys that were driving the car insisted that I not drive with her. I should stay in their car just in case we were stopped by state troopers. I followed those instructions. I do not know those guys. They never identified themselves to me. I had never known them before. They drove us all the way to New York. I got out of the car and I showed them that would be okay. And then I met a sister of mine, a half-sister of mine, and I stayed at her apartment. Those guys, plus the two guys that broke out of the jail with me, I have not seen or heard from them today. Now, what do I mean by I do not know the full story? It is my assumption, and I want to be very clear about this, because I did not pay any money. I did not know the guys that picked me up. I stayed in New York for about, as I'm in New York, the coup is going on in Liberia. I cannot get a flight out of New York on time. I was not hiding. All this nonsense about being searched, I was not hiding. I did not get a flight out. I was still in New York when Jerome Kurongba was captured. I stayed in New York for about 2 or 3 weeks. It was decided that by my sister that since things had gotten out of shape, by this time every news agency is reporting that Charles Taylor has escaped from jail. I drive on Interstate 95, not hiding, from New York after about 2 weeks to Washington, D.C. I spent a couple of days in Washington, D.C. visiting a friend of mine, the late Eric Scott. From there, I drive all the way to Atlanta, Georgia, board a plane, fly to Texas, spend time there with some family, friends down there for about another month, and then go on to Mexico and fly to
Charles Taylor sent by CIA to kill Samwel Doe and take power. Prelude to a storm. The rise of Charles Taylor in the early 1980s. Charles Taylor was just another face in the bureaucratic machinery of Samwel Doe's autocratic government. A tall, confident man with a degree in economics from Bentley University in Massachusetts. Taylor served briefly as the director of Liberia's General Services Agency. Held at the Plymouth County Correctional Facility in Massachusetts, Taylor was supposed to face extradition. But then, in September 1985, something shocking happened. Taylor simply disappeared from the prison. Officially, he had escaped, cutting through a window and vanishing into the American night. While the CIA denied involvement for years, a Freedom of Information Act request filed by the Boston Globe eventually uncovered documentation that confirmed Taylor had worked with the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency during the early 1980s. But as Doe's paranoia grew and accusations of embezzlement piled up against Taylor, he fled Liberia for the United States in 1983. There he joined Gaddafi's ideological and military training camps, a revolving door for future warlords and rebels from across Africa. Libya had become a hub for Pan-African revolutionaries, and Gaddafi's ambition of unifying Africa under anti-Western ideologies made Taylor an ideal ally. He was arrested in May 1984 in Boston on a Liberian government warrant charging him with embezzling nearly $1 million. Once hailed by the U.S. as a bulwark against communism in West Africa, Doe had become an embarrassment. He had seized power in a bloody 1980 coup, executing President William Tolbert and 13 members of his cabinet on a beach in Monrovia. This was the opening Charles Taylor had been waiting for. Though he initially aligned with the U.S., Doe's leadership descended into tribal favoritism, corruption, and a campaign of terror against opponents. Fighters were recruited from refugee camps in West Africa, many of them disgruntled Liberians and Sierra Leoneans. Taylor's invasion was swift, methodical, and devastating. At the same time, the NPFL began broadcasting propaganda, declaring themselves the true liberators of Liberia. Town after town fell to the NPFL as they marched toward Monrovia, leaving a trail of death and destruction. His forces, the NPFL, quickly captured swaths of Liberian territory, appealing to deep tribal and political grievances. Nigeria, under General Ibrahim Babangida, led a multinational peacekeeping force, which deployed to Liberia in August 1990. Their mission: stabilize the capital. In a chilling video circulated globally, Johnson is seen sipping beer while his men tortured Doe, slicing off his ears and fingers before executing him. It was one of the most horrifying televised moments of post-colonial Africa.
Protect civilians and curb the chaos.
backed by Libyan funds, training, and weapons. Taylor's rebel army was a multinational force waiting for the right moment to strike. How does one break out of a U.S. detention center awaiting extradition and not only evade local law enforcement, but cross international borders freely? American military personnel trained Liberian forces, while U.S. corporations reaped profits from rubber and iron ore. The escape? Fact or fiction? His campaign slogan was chillingly effective. He killed my ma, he killed my PA, but I will vote for him. He funded rebels in Sierra Leone's RUF, leading to his indictment for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Not in Liberia, but in a special court for Sierra Leone, seated in The Hague, exhausted from war. Many Liberians believed electing Taylor would bring peace. Charles Taylor's prison escape has long been clouded in mystery. Was Taylor a Cold War pawn in a broader geopolitical game? Did American intelligence see him as a tool to disrupt Soviet-lined regimes in West Africa? Liberia was now a failed state. History inches closer to confirming what many in Liberia long suspected: that Taylor's path to power was paved by shadows and sealed deals in Langley. By the mid-1990s, Nigeria and ECOWAS had brokered a series of fragile ceasefires and peace accords. Leading to Taylor's eventual participation in elections in 1997, the timing of his disappearance was curious. Just months before General Thomas Kwanka, a former Doe ally, as Liberia continues to rebuild. The truth about Taylor's escape and support may one day offer more than blame. It may offer closure. It is a tragic parable of how foreign meddling, Cold War gamesmanship, and regional ambition can destroy nations. Liberia paid the price. Hundreds of thousands dead, a generation lost, and trauma that still echoes through its streets. Attempted a failed coup in Liberia in November 1985. Some speculate Taylor was supposed to assist Kwanka, but didn't make it back in time. Nigeria, acting through Ikamag, both fought Taylor's forces and negotiated with him. In a controversial move, Ikamag at times appeared to fight alongside certain rebel factions while opposing others. Others argue that Taylor's usefulness to the U.S. in regional politics, especially against Soviet-lined Libya and the growing influence of Muammar Gaddafi, justified his release. In 2009, while standing trial in The Hague for war crimes committed during Sierra Leone's civil war, Taylor made a bold claim. The CIA had facilitated his escape. This bombshell raised more questions than answers. Why would U.S. intelligence aid a fugitive accused of theft, training in Libya? From fugitive to warlord, after escaping from U.S. custody, Charles Taylor traveled to Ghana, then on to Libya. It was in Libya that Taylor began forming the nucleus of what would become the National Patriotic Front of Liberia. Samwel Doe, America's brutal ally. Meanwhile, back in Liberia, Samwel Doe's regime was spiraling. Despite this, the Reagan administration funneled hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to Doe's regime, hoping to maintain influence in a strategically important region. But by 1989, the tide had turned. Doe's enemies were multiplying. Liberia's economy had collapsed and his military was riddled with desertions. The invasion. Charles Taylor returns on December 24, 1989. Charles Taylor and around 160 fighters crossed into Liberia from Cote d'Ivoire, launching the first shots of what would become one of Africa's most brutal civil wars. The United States, caught off guard, did little to intervene beyond evacuating its citizens. As Taylor gained momentum, his forces began executing civilians, journalists, and anyone suspected of loyalty to Doe. The brutal fall of Samwel Doe in response to Taylor's advance. President Doe turned to the economic community of West African states for help, but it was too late. On September 9, 1990, President Samwel Doe was captured by a rival rebel group, the Independent National Patriotic Front of Liberia, led by Prince Johnson, former ally of Taylor, who had split from the NPFL, while Taylor claimed he had no involvement in Doe's execution. The NPFL was undoubtedly part of the broader campaign that destabilized the government. Nigeria's role, a complex dance after Doe's death. Ikamog remained in Liberia to prevent Monrovia from falling into the hands of Charles Taylor. Taylor saw the Nigerian-led intervention as foreign meddling, yet he knew he needed to deal with Abuja. Ironically, the man once branded a terrorist and a fugitive, who had escaped from U.S. custody and trained under Gaddafi, now emerged as a legitimate presidential candidate. Return of the Strongman. Taylor elected president in 1997, after years of civil war that claimed over 200,000 lives. Charles Taylor won Liberia's presidential election with an overwhelming majority. But peace was short-lived. Under Taylor's rule, Liberia remained a hub for arms trafficking, diamond smuggling, and regional conflict. The CIA, the Cold War, and moral ambiguity, Taylor's stunning rise from a U.S. prison cell to the presidency of Liberia raises unsettling questions about the international complicity in Liberia's destruction. As revelations surface about CIA involvement in his prison release and collaboration during the 1980s conclusion, a legacy of fire. Charles Taylor's journey, from Massachusetts inmate to warlord president, is more than the story of one man. The international dimensions of Liberia's civil war are now impossible to ignore.